Hey everybody. I apologize if people are finding different links to this. I have not gone live really before. I thought I would start out with just letting you guys know what we're going to cover today. And if you've been following my channel and you've gotten some of the information, a lot of times people go there because they're looking for some type of body solution. And so we're going to talk about lower back pain today and just some easy wins that you could have, but also too some easy wins in regards to movement that you can actually play with. And by the way, disclaimer, this is not medical information. Make sure you're talking to your doctor first and make sure that movement and exercise is good for you. So something that we're going to cover today is I want people to ask questions. Okay. There should be a question box, I think, on the right side. So feel free to ask any questions that you have, but I did gather some questions that other people have had over time, and I thought I would address them here. I think the first thing though to really understand is that movement is actually medicine with a lot of people, and it can make them feel much better for low backs, for hips, for SI joints, for pinched nerves, and so on. But a lot of times doing certain movements too soon is actually not helpful. So I think when we go through this, I'm going to wait for people to start to gather in here a little bit before I actually go through a demonstration. But I will show you some of the easy movements and easy exercises that I use for a lot of people, and I'll tell you what that usually means when we're talking about back pain too. So I'll start off with a couple questions here. Is number one, is stretching good for lower back pain? I gathered some of these questions just to kind of prime the pump in the beginning here, because these are what people are looking for on Google. And honestly, more cases that I've seen with back pain, actually stretching is not helpful. I worked with a gentleman the other day that he was actually creating more pain with his stretching unknowingly. Like, it felt good to stretch for, like an hour or so. But it wasn't sticking, and he'd been dealing with it for about 3 weeks. It was starting to go a little bit into his outer hip and down his thigh, and so into his hamstring too. And he was a little bit concerned with that. So he's like, should I keep stretching? And I said, does stretching make you feel better? And he says, I don't know, I can't tell. And so usually I'll give people a time frame where it's like, if something's going to work, if you're using something, whatever it might be, ice, heat, massage, whatever it might be, if it's going to work, it's usually going to work definitively, like significantly, within about a 2-week period of time. This is what we call the first aid window. The first aid window is like if you cut your finger and you put a Band-Aid on it and you did the right first aid for that problem, it would self-heal itself up. Like, that's what the body just does. It wants to heal itself up if you give it a chance. But if we continue to pick that scab, then it would never heal itself. And so in this case, with his stretching, I believe he was picking a scab and he wasn't necessarily allowing his body to recover. So what we did with him was actually, number one, we took away the thing that was driving the problem, which was the stretching, although it wasn't the thing that started it. And we gave him basically the opposite. Don't stretch and do this instead, which we will cover some of the stuff again, probably around I'd say about we'll go about the 10-minute mark. So stretching is not always helpful. And actually, more people tend to try to stretch out their muscle tightness, which is a protective tightness. And I brought some models here for you guys today just to kind of understand this. And I might go through this again because I see people are going to jump in and out of this thing a little bit. So the back is pretty simple in regards to what happens with a lot of people, but not everybody. The reason for back pain for some people is not the reason for back pain for others. And that's kind of like the need to find really the mechanics that drive your back pain, but also get a good diagnosis too. By the way, an MRI is not always needed on this. So this is the front side of the spine, and this is the back side. And so what we see is that with this gentleman, with him bending forward and trying to touch his toes, he was creating some irritation of the backside here of the spine. And so when it started to travel into his leg, here's a nerve root here, which goes into all the parts of the leg. It was starting to kind of create some pressure on it. Now, repetitive bending forward throughout the pain down his leg. So what we did instead was we just simply extended him, and he was on a plan of just arching his back the other way for a period of time and having good posture without ripping the scab off. Now, there's different reasons for back pain too. There could be that disc herniation, which we mentioned, in the side's a little easier to see, which is right in there. There also can be compression of this joint right here called the facet. There's a bunch of these facets in there. There's also the nerve root. Notice that there's a hole. The hole gets smaller as you arch your back and gets bigger as you bend forward. So sometimes bending forward makes some people feel better because the nerve is happy. Makes other people feel worse because the disc is not happy. And other times people extending backwards, this joint right there, the facet joint, isn't happy either. But there's lots of other reasons for it. These are just some of the more common ones. Now, could muscle spasms be the problem here? They could. They really could. But based upon the rough percentages, because a lot of times we'll work off a percentage basis with people, we'll figure out what's going on with them, but also we'll figure out, based upon this information we have, what's the probability of this person having this one thing, like a muscle spasm being the thing, versus the other ones. And so most of the time, people that are having spasms on the backside of the spine, because and it hurts to bend forward, but it also stretches them to bend forward. It's actually, those muscles are usually seen as a protective mechanism. They're trying to stop the forward bending. But in this case, with this gentleman, he was bending forward, kind of blowing through the protective mechanism that was going to help himself resolve and continually to drive the problem, over and over again. That's why he had it for so long. And I know people have this even for years at a time. Now, since I have the model here still, I should talk about arthritis, because I know that a very common question is, if I have arthritis, can I get better? Yes. Arthritis is actually not really correlated to back pain. And if we look at a graph, I don't have it on hand, but usually in the 30s and 40s, people have more back pain than when they get older. And when they get older, they have a different type of back pain, but it's just almost like a slope like this, like 30s, 40s. And then we start to get into 60s, 70s, and they just have less. So when they have less, then when they get older, they kind of have more arthritis, right? Since it's old age. So they don't necessarily correlate to each other. There are aspects that have a part of it, but here's the reason why I bring this up is people are very disabled mentally when they think that arthritis and age has a relationship on what their back feels like. I've had back pain when I was 15. I had it again when I was 35. And when I was 35, I thought, wow, maybe this is going to be old age. And I feel better now at 38 than I did when I was 35. So most people can get better. They just have to know the right things to do. So I'll answer one more question. By the way, do you guys have any questions yet? I'll still pull from the list that I have. I'll pull from the list right now, and then we'll do two more questions, and I'll explain them, and I'll get into the movement-based stuff real quickly, and then I'll answer more questions. So is ice and heat good, or ice or heat, rather? I don't tend to suggest either to people, but a lot of times when there's a very early on problem, like it's like, say you're stuck on the floor, ice is a good remedy, or it's a good thing to decrease a local inflammatory response for, I'd say about 5 days, but a lot of times some people burn themselves with ice, which is not a good thing. They leave it on too long. So ice, though, in chronic conditions, like people have had it for years, I usually don't bother too much with that. They tend to say they like heat more because it loosens everything up. But usually when I work with people, I don't suggest either. Usually it's a movement-based correction, and they go very well from there. Is rest needed? Rest, again, is kind of along the lines of that like 5-day period. It's okay to have like a little 5-day period where you're just going, where you're taking a break. I wouldn't call it I wouldn't call it passive rest, like you're just laying in bed and just only watching TV. I would get up a bit. I would crawl around. I would try to move a little bit within the parameters that you have. And if it's painful, the pain is actually alarm. It's your body's alarm telling you what's going on. So I would use your pain to figure out what movements are good for you. And that's usually what we do through movement-based corrections with people as well. So I'm going to show you just a couple things right here. I have a few tools, and you guys might not have these tools with you. I apologize. I'm going to, since we're in quarantine basis, this is in my bedroom. So the lighting might not be perfect, but we have this little light here over here, so we can make this as pretty as possible. So here's a couple tools that I really like, is a rope or a belt, and this is a glute band. The glute band it's something that I mean, you could use a heavy resistance band like the colorful ones, but they're thick. They're like 1-2 inch thick. I've had some people use a belt. I've had some people have their spouse or a friend simulate this too. These things are going to be hard to find right now on Amazon because of the whole COVID thing. But if you have them, it's pretty nice. Now, if the band is stretchy, like I don't have a stretchy band around here. If it's super stretchy, like it's colorful, like colors of the rainbow, then it's bright yellow and stuff, they're too light and it just won't even work. So usually what I have people do first is just kind of move around and see how things feel. Sometimes bending forward is not fun to them. Sometimes bending backwards, sometimes squatting, sometimes lunging. And so usually when they use that as a measurement tool, you can figure out, was there a positive effect? Was this movement and exercise a positive exercise for them? Because it's not positive for everybody. It's not helpful to everybody. In reality, movement is medicine. And if you select the wrong movement, then it could make you worse. But if you use pain as a guide with this, it's like, oh, that doesn't feel good. I'm going to stop. That makes complete logical sense. So that's why pain is around, to help us out. So I usually have people put this around their knees on their back. And so first is, you can see it's pretty heavy. I can barely stretch that thing right there. And so I'll usually have people just go into we call it a banded bridge. And so we'll try to break the band in half, literally in half. When people do it too, I'll do it this way so you can see a little bit. When we go through the movement, sometimes people just kind of let it go slack every time. It's not what we want. The point is to get a nice handful of cheek hair really active. And I'm sure you guys have heard about glute activating exercises. Truthfully, I think a lot of people are on the right track with doing some of those, but they don't do them to the point where it's actually a protective for a period of time. I remember the first time I did these, my back felt great for like 5 days, but when people only have relief for like a couple minutes, they just haven't gone to the intensity. And so usually I have them break it, hands on the floor, push the floor, and start to go up and down. Now, what a lot of people end up noticing is that, well, I feel it in my hamstring. Well, bring the feet together a little bit, a little closer together, and break the band harder, and then go up and down again. Some people still say, I feel it in my hamstring. Well, bring the toes up some and drive to the heels. Sometimes that solves it. I know there's a lot of possible solutions to this, but pain corrupts movement, and it makes it so the body's really struggling to use the right musculature. So it should feel like a large area here. The last thing is some people arch their back, and I'll show you from this angle, is they tend to do this kind of thing when they're going up and down. And this just makes their back really tired. It makes it feel like it was working too much. And this shouldn't really feel like the back is working too much. It should feel like this is working. So I generally don't like to have people tell them where to feel something too much, because I want them to focus on breaking and pushing through the floor. But if they can do it, but I want them to know like where the intention is. And so we're going to keep going here. We're going to do this for a little bit of time. And we're basically going to go to the point to where you feel like, okay, I do really, really need a break. Not like I kind of need a break, like I do need a break. Like I can start to feel it, the fire ramping up here in a good way. Whew. And I'm going to take a short break here, about 5-10 seconds. Hands on the floor, push to the floor, break the band. Get the hips as high as you can, as long as nothing bothers you. Again, pain is the guide. If pain says, that's too high, then you just don't go that high. So when you use pain as an asset to what movements you should do, it becomes a pretty simple thing, as long as you give it a little chance to work itself out. So I'm sure everybody, if you're doing this, it's going to feel pretty challenging right into there. That's what we want. And I'm going to keep going just to kind of give you an idea of how long this can take. But the harder you break the band, the quicker it goes. Like I'm getting pretty tired right now. Okay. Usually I'll have people go to about 70% full effort. 100% is like, I can't do it anymore. Like I literally cannot do it anymore, but it's effortful. It's not painful. And then I have them usually go and move around a little bit. It should feel sore, a little bit sore and like woken up right here. But all the other movements should feel actually pretty like butter. Like they should feel better in most cases. Again, if it's the wrong thing for you, then you might not feel like that was helpful at all. So I feel it where they're supposed to feel it. And so I walked up to one guy and I said, he had a like wince on his face, not in like it was more like a painful wince. And so I asked him, where do you feel this? Or how are you doing? And he's like, good, I'm fine. And then so I came back after and he's going like this. He was like stretching his back out and stuff. I said, what's going on? He's like, well, tighten my back up. And I said, did you feel it the whole time? He said, yeah. And I said, I can't stress this enough. This should not be felt in the back. It should be felt in the hips. And that's what a lot of people end up doing through when they have ongoing problems in their back is they move a lot through the back, and that's why it continues. So movement to the back is not always a good thing. It can be good, but sometimes it just drives things to death people. Now, I saw that Bob and Brad, the PTs, did this on here too. I think this is a great one to do if you have like a belt or a yoga strap, or in this case, I have a rope. A rope is not always needed, but this is a really comforting position for a lot of people where they end up being in this book reading position, and it's actually very comfortable. I saw someone write on it was a Google question. It says, how do you know if back pain is serious? Well, there's only three major things that are, we call them the red flags. It's loss of bowel or change of bowel or bladder function, meaning bathroom time is all of a sudden weird. There's numbness into the shape of a saddle between your legs, or there's lack of function of the feet, like foot drop, tripping on rugs. Those are how we know that things are they're not good. Now, on the other hand, when we're talking about pain levels, I hope everyone's in this position, by the way, if you can tolerate it, then should feel comfortable. This is part of the thing we're gonna have to have a rest here. When pain is consistent across the board, it's like day in, day out, all day, all night, consistently, always a 5 out of 10, never changes based upon position, what you do, and so on, then that is sometimes an inflammatory response. And that what might be a more remedy of an ice or medication. Now, when it ebbs and flows with positions, such as in this position, it's like, wow, that's like nothing, perfect. It's like a 1. This is comfortable. Then we know that there's an ebb and flow, which means there's a mechanical aspect to the problem, and then we know we can help it pretty quickly. I think the trouble with a lot of people end up feeling is they feel like recovery from back pain or getting to the root of the problem will take forever. It really doesn't. It can take a couple weeks. Take a couple weeks to really reduce a lot of the problems. Pain levels reduce, but functionality doesn't always return yet, because functionality is an aspect of getting your body to recover and be strong and be resilient again. And if you've been resting for a long period of time, that won't come back, because you have to work your body out. So this is the next part of this movement, and we call them I call them sloppy cobras. So this is not your standard yoga cobra. This is just kind of a sloppy one. You just let your hips just kind of relax. You just press up and lock the elbows and relax the head, and just kind of go. And if things feel good, then you continue. If they feel a little pinching in the low back, usually that's a normal response for the first 5 or so. And most people can't get as high as I can, which is okay. You just kind of go what you can do. And your arms end up getting tired, which is normal, but the back shouldn't feel like it's working. It should feel relaxed. Another variation is lock the elbows and just kind of drop down and let it settle. And you halfway up and drop back down and let it settle. And so notice that as I go through reps of this, I'm not actually stretching the back. I'm actually arching it. And so if we're talking about the muscles back there, they're the ones that are like the tight ones. I'm actually doing the opposite of stretching it. And for most people, I'd say a strong majority of people, they end up feeling like, wow, this is the best back stretch I've done, and I haven't stretched a thing. And it's because we've addressed a central threat, and it's usually something else, So again, I said the back pain is usually protective. So I usually have people go about 10, 20 of these and just feel it out. Now the strap of the rope is going to be something that where you kind of just put it in your hands, just figure out a good distance at the top here. And it should feel like it's kind of around your belt line. And it should feel like it's just giving you a little bit of pressure at the bottom. So I've adjusted it now to where it's giving me a little pressure at the bottom. I'm going to take up a little bit of extra slack now. And now I'm going to press up again. It should feel like it's just holding me down a little bit. Okay. Some people have mentioned decompression. Is decompression helpful? Yeah, it can be helpful on some people, but this is actually a form of decompression because it's decompressing a part of the back, not just generally the back. Usually when people think about decompression, they're talking about long axis decompression versus just segmental. And long axis is, I mean, you're gonna have to pay someone, $4 or $5 grand to put you in one of those big machines, or you just do something like a focal one, depending upon what your need is. Now, usually after some reps of those, I have people feel things out. How does that feel? Hey, that feels like butter again. Great. You didn't do anything of stretching of the back or the hamstring or the hip flexor, and normally they'll tend to feel better. And so what this brings up is, why did that work? And so usually when this works, we're looking at the disc as a driver. Remember that forward round. I'll bring us back up to the model again. Again, sorry. Bedroom, quarantine. So when you bring it back up this model again, people talk about posture as being a reason for back pain. It is when it is, but when it's not, it's not. Like I'm slouching right now, I have no back pain. It's because I don't have an active disc irritation or an active segment that doesn't like forward rounding. So usually when those things help, it's going to be this. But there's other reasons for back pain that aren't necessarily disc related. Disc is just a very common one, and it's it's uncommon for people to actually be treated effectively for a disc. They just let it rest. They let the pain go away, and then they end up having pain that comes up once every 6 months to a year, and they feel like they have a quote unquote bad back or a weak back. And I think that's rarely the case. It's just their back is unsupported. And so when we go through the remedy of things, is number one is typically I have to realize that number one, movement is medicine. Okay, quote unquote medicine, because it makes people feel better. All right. If for most people, when you get them just generally moving, let's just say people with knee pain, when you get them generally moving, if they don't have like something really locked up in the knee, usually they feel a little bit better. When they start to use their hips, they feel a little bit better. When people have shoulder pain, it wasn't from a dislocation, a little bit of rolling it through makes it feel better. Like a lot of times this will make the upper trap feel better. Okay. When movement stops, then we end up having, especially if it stops for a long period of time, we end up having areas of the body which are becoming deconditioned or not strong or poor endurance capabilities. So they can't hold the position, which makes it so, let's say we're talking about this spine guy. Let's just say you're walking, like the spine here gets a little bit sloppy. Sorry, let me change. So the spine will get a little bit too sloppy and it'll kind of irritate the stuff in here. So building some support systems around the spine, such as the back muscles, such as the hips, such as the side wall or the obliques, as well as the front wall, and even working on things like breathing are extremely helpful to decreasing ongoing reoccurrence of back pain. And so usually when you stop movement, it ends up setting you up for failure later. Now, again, is movement helpful for everybody? Depends on the situation. And as I mentioned before, bending forward for this individual is not a helpful movement. And I told that gentleman to stop bending forward for a week while we start to build some support in the area and reduce the sensitivity before we actually get him to bend forward. But we want him to bend forward again. It's just not right at this point in time. And I have met a lot of people who they've spent 10 years thinking bending forward is not a good thing, or letting the spine round or sitting in bad posture is not always is not helpful at all, because it can be helpful for some people. And in fact, some people, we tell them, okay, make perfect posture and then cut 10% out of that. And that's actually makes them feel better. So certain movements can be bad for a certain period of time, and then they need to be reintroduced. Now, if you're looking for help, we're here to help. We specialize in creating exercise and movement-based programs for people who are suffering with low back pain, as well as groin and hip and SI joint regional stuff. Because we know that people who are, especially if, we're all working out now, everyone's working out now, and the sad thing is that sometimes too much volume, such as like even like the spike where we talk about flattening the spike of COVID. The spike is too much for the body versus just flattening the curve. And even selecting certain exercises with certain speed and intensity is actually much better for building support in the spine without creating an irritation. Because the easiest way to slow down the progress of healing, or actually getting strong and building strength throughout the hips and the shoulders and core strength and endurance, the easiest way to slow it down is to get hurt again. And so usually with specific exercise selection, you can get people to build up a really good resiliency, and their body is really it's not as old as you think. I know I had a guy the other day, he was 25, and he said, am I just getting older? No, you're not just getting it. Like, your spine is probably feeling it. You probably feel worse than someone who's 50 right now, but their spine looks worse on image because of that arthritis. So this feeling of getting older, a lot of times people I think they feel that because they feel bad and they correlate it with age, and it's not always the case. So I know a lot of people who feel better in their 40s and 50s than they did in their 20s and 30s because they realize that they need to take control. They need to take control over what they can do for their body, build some resiliency, build some strength, build some endurance, not hard endurance, but body endurance to hold position, to get their weak back, to stop feeling so weak and fragile. So if you're looking for some help to build a program like this, again, we specialize in this. This is what we do all the time. And I don't remember the last time it went poorly, but obviously when people are kind of building their own program, like they don't do it every day. Like, I don't do my own taxes because I know my taxes are going to be really bad if I do them myself. So if you're looking for suggestions, please reach out. I see there's still some of you on here who are, now's the Q&A time. If there's no Q&A, I'm going to answer one last question for the list that I have. And then we're going to close it. Okay. So if anyone has any questions, on the bottom right, I think, is the spot you can ask. Now, let's see, what can I do to relieve my lower back pain? Well, actually, let's go with this other one. Is walking good for lower back pain? I had a person the other day, they had an interesting story. They said, well, it hurts to sit, it hurts to bend forward, it hurts in the morning to get out of bed and to get out of cars. But funny, it's like, it really feels good when I walk for a little bit, but it doesn't feel good when I actually get up out of the chair to start walking, but it starts to settle itself. In that situation, yeah, walking sounds really good. Like, it might sound like a super easy and like too logical way of thinking about it, but if it feels good, you do it. I have a friend who, she was having some back pain, and she knew all the little exercises that we did on the floor a little bit ago, and she knew even much more than that. And so she's like, I just can't figure it out. Like, I can't tell if it's this or that, or what movement is going to be helpful in the long term. I said, well, what feels good? Does it always feel bad? And she says, no, it feels good when I walk. And I said, why don't you just walk more? And so she started walking more, and it started feeling good. And so that's the hard thing, is it's very hard for people to see the easy wins. But even positions of comfort, like laying on your back or laying on your side, like these are using your body as a pain as an asset. And it tells you how we can remedy this. And sometimes they're very close to just, all they need is a little bit of dosage in what feels better to actually get them to get out of the hole. Okay, thank you for everyone for joining me. We're going to close it up now. And if you're looking for more information on how to really proceed, if you want some more Q&A from me, or if you want some direction, there's going to be a link in the description for a webinar that we're putting on. Actually, it's going to be this Wednesday. So I think it's the 15th of April, 2020. And so just go through there. We're going to, me and a colleague are going to be on there talking about back pain and different diagnoses that we usually see and common histories and other things to do. So we're going to be on that, and we'll have a special offer at the end of it as well. So subscribe to the channel, share this with a friend. Oh, thanks, Evan. Oh, thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming on. I'll talk to you guys soon, okay?